Yo guys, what's going on? Robert Warshack here. We're going to be going over the free and new and returning player decks that got updated with the new Starcraft mini set. For those of you who are veterans and you play it pretty much every day, this video doesn't help you at all because you guys don't get anything for free, because why would you? We got to get these new players to get some good stuff. So we're going to go over how you can get them and then what's inside of them, and obviously which one is the best for you. So in order to get them, this is for new players or returning players, and if even you've already gotten one as a returning player, you can still get it. So the key here is that you have to stay inactive for 90 days. So if you do not log into Hearthstone for 90 days, you will be eligible for this as a returning player. And then if you're a new player, I believe you need to reach bronze 10 for the first time, and then one of these will be eligible to you. Keep in mind that these decks, you can use them I think for like 5 days or a week. You can play any of them. You just pick and then you can play it, and then at the end of those 5 days, it'll force you to select one of them as something that you get to keep. So all of that's pretty straightforward. So taking a look at the Death Knight deck, this is going to be the Frost Starship Death Knight deck. This is one of the decks I played a lot of, not exactly this past mini set, and it's a lot of fun. This is a more aggressive variation with Horizon's Edge, which is a 4-mana location, deal 3 damage, randomly split among all enemies. After a friendly minion dies, you get to reopen this. This deck has a lot of really small minion like Guiding Figure, which is the Starship piece. We have the Winter, we have Mosh Pit, which is spend 3 corpses, which is what happens when a minion dies, you get a corpse, and then you give another friendly minion Reborn, and it's really good to put Reborn on stuff with Death Rattle. So the Death Rattle procs, it dies, the minion comes back, the Death Rattle dies. A lot of value in there. It's also a great way to juice up the Starship, so you can have a big, thick ship. This deck also contains Fresca, which is a legendary, costs 1 less for each minion that died this game. Death Rattle take control of a random enemy minion. This is very powerful. One of the scariest legendaries or even cards in Death Knight, found in pretty much every Death Knight deck. And another key card in the deck is going to be the Brittlebone Buccaneer, which is a 2-mana 1/4. Whenever you play a Death Rattle minion, give it Reborn. So this, as you can play it like an aggro deck, and it is pretty aggressive with all of the small minions and the high quality of damage that you can get with Corpsicle and Horizon's Edge. It also has the ability to go more mid-range. I wouldn't say control, but definitely more in the mid-range because of the fact you run Exodar, which you can launch the Starship, you get a bunch of pieces, you're going to play Buccaneer, you can then replay all the pieces for 1 mana, give it all Reborn, and that's just really good stuff there. So fun Death Knight deck, revolves around the Starship, aggro to mid-range kind of deck, going to run out of steam later in the game because it does have limited draw with only the Chillfall Baron. Moving down to the Hunter deck, this is a very, very aggressive Hunter deck that includes a couple new cards that are very powerful, like the Scout. This is after you discover a card, you get a copy of it. So this is a lot of value if you line your Scout up with stuff like the Natalie, which is a fantastic new Hunter legendary. Probably gives you the best hero power in the game, which is replace your hero power with Tracking, which is a card, and you get to discover a card from your deck. So for 1 mana, 3 cards pop up and you get to pick one. And that's really good if you have the Scout out, because then you get 2 copies of that card. He also has cards like the Alien Encounters, which summons 2/2/5 beasts with Taunt, costs 1 less for each card you discover this game. You're going to be discovering a lot of cards, a lot of the cards in the deck discover. And so not only if you have the Scout out, you get value that way, you're discounting things in your deck. It runs Tidepool Pupil, which if you cast 3 spells while holding this, discover one of them. This very powerful because you have 0 mana Alien Encounters, right? And then you can play that, goes into Pupil, you play Pupil, you get another Alien Encounters. If you have Scout out, you get 2 of them. You can make a very, very, very mid-range board by turn like 3 to like 6, and it's very difficult for some opponents to deal with that, like, you know, 7 minions and 6 of them being 2/5s with Taunt, and just putting in some chip damage in the early game to mid game with Hunter allows you to close it out much, much quicker. This deck runs quite a few cards like Tracking and Bird Watching to help you find Natalie in the early game. Both of those discover a card from your deck. The Bird Watching even gives all of the copies +2/+1, meaning if the card is already on the board, so for example, you turn 1 Scout, you play it, it lives, you Bird Watching, pick the other Scout, you now have a 3/3 on the board that can attack as well, and you got the other Scout, and you got 2 more Scouts because Scout, if you discover a Scout, we'll get another Scout. And then another super powerful card in the deck is going to be the Grifta. It's a legendary neutral card that you discover an amazing amulet to give both players, so you get a better copy than your opponent does. There's a one that does 6 damage to whatever you want. There's one that's legit just a 1 mana mind control. So if you have Scout out and you vendor and you get a really powerful amulet, you're going to probably win that game, especially if it goes into the Tidepool Pupil, because then you can get 2 more of that amulet. And I've seen Hunters get like 5 of the 1 mana deal 6s, which pretty much just kills somebody. So Hunter, like normal, pretty aggressive deck. A lot of options here. This is probably one of the harder aggressive decks to play, given the fact that how many choices you have to make every turn. Generally, aggressive style decks only have 1 to 2 choices max per turn, while this Hunter deck has almost an infinite amount of choices between like the discover and then copying the discover cards and then discovering more cards and then what to play and the mana management. So I would have to say one of the higher thinky aggro decks, but still fairly straightforward if you play a few games with it and you get the hang of it. Moving down to the Elemental Mage, this would be the easiest deck for a new player to play. It is still very powerful and can still hit legend, I would like to say, with ease. Some key cards in this deck is going to be Sauron. This is 6 mana, 7/6 Battlecry. Give all your elementals in the deck +1 fire damage. So this is really huge because it runs limited spells, and even if you didn't even attack your opponent in the face at all that game, let's say you played your minions, every single one of them died every turn, you play this guy, and then you can go ahead and play the Overflow Surgery. This is summon a copy of this for each turn in a row you played an elemental, which is going to be every turn because the only minions in this deck are elemental. Each one of these is going to have spell power, so you're going to get 7+ spell power, and then you run cards like the Molten Rune, which deal 3 damage, so you have the +7. This does 3. This is a 3 mana, deal 10. This has Forge, which says this cast twice, which means for 3 mana you're doing 20 damage. This seems like a lot, or like a pretty late game combo. This happens very frequently, almost all the time. So pretty easy to get off, a ton of damage. There's also other spells that are very inexpensive like this. This is a deal 4 damage to a random enemy. If you played an elemental last turn, choose the target. So this does 11 damage for 2 mana. And then our draw in the deck is the new Blazing. So this is a 3 mana, 3/1 Battlecry. Destroy the top 3 cards of your deck. Any fire spells or elemental are drawn instead. So this is a 3 mana, 3/1, just draw 3. Everything in the deck is a fire spell or an elemental, so you're always going to be able to get those. If anybody puts plagues in your deck or some other card, this actually will just get rid of that card. So this is actually even better than what it is with this deck, because you will basically null and void any other negative card that you happen to, if your opponent puts that in your deck. We also run Solar Flare, which is insane. This is a 5 mana, deal 2 damage, which sounds low to all of your enemies. However, it costs 1 less for each elemental you control, which means, again, if we look at the Overflow Surger, we're going to have 7 minions out. We get to play the 3 mana, deal 20, and then the Solar Flare is literally deal 9 for 0 mana, and it hits everything on your opponent's side, including face. So it's very easy to do well over 30 damage with this deck for very, very cheap in the late game. As long as you draw this card early, you're pretty much going to keep this in your mulligan every single game, and you can get this guy out quite quickly with the Archvist, which is your 2 mana, 2/2. The next elemental you play costs 2 less, so you get to Archvist, you wait a turn, you go ahead and coin Sauron, depending on what you have. Besides that, the deck pretty much just plays the elementals, and they do things that are really good for you and not so good for your opponent. If I was a brand new player to the game and I was just learning it, Elemental Mage would probably be what I would go for. So moving down to Paladin, I don't feel very strongly about Paladin. I don't like Paladin personally. This is the Libram OTK Lanessa Paladin. So she is a 5 mana, 2/6 rogue tourist. Your spells that cost 2 cast twice. So in combination with being able to play like Manager, which will deal 4 damage, you get 2 coins. The coins trigger twice. You get Divine Bruise. This gives a Divine Shield, and if it already has it, you get +1 attack. And then, of course, you have a Wind Fury weapon in here. I don't know why the Wind Fury weapon isn't in here, as that's a really good combo. It just runs the Librams, I guess, instead. These go to 0 mana, and then the Lanessa copies these, and then they get twice the buff. So pretty much if any minion lives at all, you're going to be able to just give it an astronomical amount of stats and hit face, while also just coincidentally killing your opponent with Lanessa and Glow Sticks, because Glow Stick deals 4 damage, costs 1 if you've cast a Holy Spell this turn. The Holy Spell is the Divine Brew, so it's very easy for 1 mana with the Glow Stick to deal 8 damage. You have Divine Brew, you've got the, like I said, Librams that deal a lot of damage, which give your minions a lot of buff, which you just attack them in the face. Would not recommend this deck unless you really enjoy OTK style decks and combo oriented decks to make really explosive turns. Now moving down to Asteroid Shaman. A lot of people really, really hated this deck. I personally didn't really mind it. I think it's cool. I think Asteroids in its current state with the Etherical Oracle going up to 4 mana instead of 3, they still haven't updated that. I still think the deck is very powerful. I think for a new player, it's pretty apparent, like, you know, this card puts asteroids in your deck, and then the asteroids come out and kill your opponent's stuff, which makes the gameplay a little bit more streamlined. There's a lot of spell power in this deck, so for those of you who don't know what an asteroid is, here's an asteroid card. Battlecry, deal 3 damage to an enemy minion, shuffle 3 asteroids in your deck. The asteroids, when drawn, deal 2 damage, right? So that doesn't sound like a lot, but we also run cards like Behemoth, which is Battlecry, your asteroids deal 1 more damage, so it goes up to 3. And then, again, Spell Burst, which is when you play a spell, shuffle 3 more asteroids in your deck. In order to juice them even further, we've got stuff like Shudder in the deck, which is your next Battlecry triggers 3 times. which is pretty insane if you think about it, because we can either use this on the breaker or anything that shuffles the asteroids in the deck, so that we would shuffle 9 asteroids, or you can go with something like the behemoth and give your asteroids +3 instead of the normal 1, and then you're still only shuffling the 3, but they're doing, you know, substantially more damage, right? And then to keep the asteroids rolling, it runs triangulate, which is discover a different spell in your deck, which means triangulate can't discover triangulate, and then shuffle 3 copies of it into your deck. So you would ideally pick the asteroid, right? And then the asteroid would go off. You get to draw a card, and then it shuffles 3 more asteroids in your deck, allowing you to continue your asteroid onslaught. Another huge damage card in the deck, if the asteroids just aren't enough, is the Incendious. This is at the end of your turn, upgrade your eruptions, which is what it puts into your deck. Battlecry, shuffle 5 eruptions in your deck. When drawn, eruptions do 2 damage to everything on your opponent's side. So this is very good, again, with Shudder as well, because you shuffle 15 eruptions into your deck, which is theoretically just lethal. If you have 15 eruptions, they do 2 each, and you draw all of them, your opponent just dies. We can juice these with spell power, which is why the novice zappers in the deck, so the asteroids and the eruptions scale with spell power. So if you have a bunch of spell power stuff out, which is the goal of the deck, and then you draw your asteroids, which you'll have a bunch in the deck, or eruptions, so Oracle, which is spell damage +1, spell burst, draw 2 cards. We'll draw 2 spells specifically. This is a huge thing. This isn't just cards, this is spells. This deck doesn't run very many spells, which means when you're putting the asteroids in the deck and the eruptions in the deck, and then you spell burst with the Oracle out, you already get the spell damage, and you're drawing the spells, which again, most of the time is going to be your triangulate just to get more asteroids, or just your asteroids or eruptions. So very powerful deck. A lot of people stopped playing it when the mini set came out. This was probably one of the most popular decks on ladder before the mini set. Now with the Oracle nerf to 4, a lot of people have just moved to other decks that are new and fresh. However, I think Asteroid Shaman will come back, and it's just going to play a little bit more greedy, may play like Fizzle and Zola, or maybe something like that. They're just going to allow this deck to have even more value in the late game, because the meta is shifting to more of a mid-range control meta right now. Not a lot of aggro, but I'm expecting aggro to do better once everybody gets some more refined lists. But either way, Asteroid Shaman, in my opinion, pretty fun deck. I enjoyed playing it for what it was, and I think it's a safe choice if you enjoy Shaman, and a kind of new mechanic if you haven't played Hearthstone in a while. Moving to the Warrior deck, this is probably going to be the weakest of all of the decks. However, it does contain quite a few powerful cards, which you can play in other classes if you just happen to be picking decks solely based on the cards you get, so you can put those cards in other decks that you want to play. So let's take a look at that. We're looking at Ceaseless. This is like the most common, or one of the most common neutral legendaries. It's almost in every single deck, or a high majority of decks. It's 100 mana, so as you can tell, it's very easy to play. It's a cost 1 less each time a card was drawn, played, destroyed. And this will probably go off somewhere around turn like 8 to 10. Generally, it costs 0 mana. However, it'll cost like 10 to 5 around like turn 7-ish, depending on how much you're drawing, how many minions are dying. Obviously, each game is different. If it's control deck versus control deck, there's not very many minions dying, so it'll take a little bit more time. However, you're playing a control warrior, so there's always time. This deck also runs Ignis, which is, it allows you to forge a weapon. This weapon's very powerful. Not a lot of people play Ignis. A lot of people don't expect to play Ignis, and a lot of people do not play weapon destruction. So picking a 10 mana weapon with Wind Fury and summons 2 8/8s or gives you armor is huge. So this just win game on the spot as well. It runs the New Heights, which is Ramp and Warrior, increases your maximum mana by 3 and gain an empty mana crystal. We get to run this because we're running the Druid Tourist. So if you run Ham the Hungry in your deck, you get to play the Druid cards from this expansion, which was Pearls in Paradise. And of course, we want to run New Heights. Generally, this deck would also run Hydration Station, which is not found in the deck, which is why I think it's one of the weaker decks, because right now, most of the Control Warriors are running the Infinite, Taunt, Starship, Hydration Station, Ziliax thing. I don't even think this deck has Ziliax, which is also, there it is. It actually does run Ziliax, which is good. Ziliax is also another huge neutral card, which you're going to find in most decks right now. So strictly speaking on like value, you get 2 or 3 very good legendaries, neutrals, that you can play in all of your decks. If none of the decks that I covered are for you, or you just want to play something I didn't cover, picking Warrior strictly to get those 3 legendaries wouldn't be a bad choice at all. This deck also runs Odin. This is kind of like its win condition, which is a 9 mana 8/8 for the rest of the game. After your hero gains armor, they gain that much attack as well, which means when you play like Shield Block, it's a 2 mana, you also get 5 attack. So that's very, very good. You can combo that with stuff like the Alloy Advisor, which whenever this takes damage, gain 3 armor, so that's 3 attack. You run the Razorfen Rockstar, which is after you gain armor, gain 2 more, and then you can like combo that with Blade Storm, and you can get well over 30 attack. Well, you get 30 armor, and then you get 30 attack at the same time. So And then you can combo that with like Ignis and get a Wind Fury weapon, and then it gets even more powerful. So Warrior, it's fun. I do like Control Warrior. However, this deck is probably the weakest out of all the ones that are available to pick. However, does contain very powerful legendaries like Ziliax and the Ceaseless Expanse. So it really just depends. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave in the section below. I also stream 5 to 6, 7 days a week on Twitch. That's also probably the best way to ask me questions. I always do my best to answer any questions in chat revolving around players, decks, questions, concerns, and stuff like that. That is all of the new free and returning player decks. It'll probably be updated again once the next expansion comes out, which will be the first expansion of this year, sometime I'm guessing in March. And we also get the rotation, which we're going to lose the 3 oldest sets. We're going to get a new core set, and a lot of these decks that we're seeing right now probably won't exist. So with that, thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.